Most people live only half a life. They show the parts that win approval and hide the parts that make them nervous. They smile, they play the role, they polish the mask, but under the mask, the shadow waits, and the more you deny it, the more power it gains. You see it when anger bursts out in small moments, or when you find yourself jealous of someone else's success. You see it in the people who irritate you most because they are reflecting something you can't admit in yourself. The shadow is always whispering, "Look here, this is you, too." But instead of listening, we run. We try to be good, pure, perfect. We imagine the goal of life is to become all light. But light without shadow does not exist. They are two sides of the same coin. And so long as you try to cut yourself in half, you will always feel incomplete. The shadow is not here to ruin you. It is here to balance you, to show you what you have left behind. If you face it honestly, you'll find something surprising. The shadow is not only your darkness, it is also your hidden strength. Think of anger. Most people think it's bad, but anger, when seen clearly, shows what you deeply care about. It is passion misdirected. Or think of envy. It feels ugly, but it tells you what you secretly long for, the dream you told yourself you could never have. Even fear has a message. It shows where your edge is, the place you are meant to grow. These feelings, if ignored, will control you. But if understood, they guide you. Your purpose is not separate from them. It grows out of them. The wound is where the gift begins. This is why so many great teachers, artists, and healers find their calling in their struggles. The poet turns heartbreak into words. The healer turns pain into compassion. The leader turns failure into wisdom. Their light was born in their shadow, and so is yours. The parts of yourself you have hidden may be the very soil where your true life waits to grow. To face the shadow is not to destroy it. It is to accept it, to listen to it, and to weave it into your wholeness. For only then can you discover the life you are meant to live. You may wonder, how do I actually face this shadow? Most people imagine it as wrestling with some inner demon. But it is not about fighting. It is about noticing. The next time you feel jealous, instead of saying, "This is bad, I shouldn't feel it," pause and ask, what does this reveal about me? What is this feeling trying to tell me? In this way, you begin to treat your shadow not as an enemy, but as a messenger. And the moment you do this, the shadow begins to lose its grip over you. Remember, what you resist persists. What you run from, you carry. But what you accept begins to transform. Think of it like holding a beach ball underwater. The harder you push, the stronger it fights to rise. That is what happens with the shadow. You try to bury it, but it comes back with greater force. Yet if you simply let it float, it finds its balance on the surface. The same is true of your hidden feelings. When you allow them, you no longer waste your energy suppressing them. You free that energy for living, for creating, for loving, and here is the deeper secret. Your purpose is not something handed down from the sky. It is something that emerges when you live as a whole being. If you only live from your good side, your polite side, you are not whole. You are only half alive. But when you allow the dark with the light, when you say yes to the full spectrum of who you are, then your purpose begins to take shape. It comes not from effort or searching, but from alignment. The shadow, once faced, shows you what truly matters to you. You see, the shadow is honest, brutally honest. It does not care about appearances, about manners, about what people think. It shows you your raw edges, and within those edges lies truth. For example, a person who hides their anger may discover once they face it, that they are meant to speak up for others, to fight for justice. A person who hides their envy may discover that it points to a passion they abandoned long ago. Even fear, when embraced, becomes courage in disguise. Your purpose lives in the places you least want to look. So ask yourself, gently, what part of me have I been hiding? What trait do I judge harshly in myself or in others? What dream have I pushed away because it seemed too much, too risky? Write these down, sit with them, not to condemn them, not to indulge them, but simply to acknowledge them. You will see that each shadow carries a thread, and if you follow the thread, it leads to a deeper understanding of who you are and what you are here to do. Facing the shadow is frightening, yes, but it is also liberating. Now let us consider how this affects your relationships. Have you noticed how the same conflicts appear again and again with different people? Perhaps you always clash with authority, or maybe you always find yourself drawn to the same kind of partner. These are not accidents, they are the shadow at work. Relationships act as mirrors, reflecting back the parts of yourself you have yet to face. The person who irritates you most is showing you something about yourself. Instead of only blaming them, ask, what is this revealing about me? In this way, every conflict becomes an opportunity. And when you begin to see your shadow in others, compassion grows. You realize that they, too, are struggling with hidden fears and desires. They, too, are projecting what they cannot face. And suddenly, instead of resenting, you begin to understand. This does not mean excusing harm, but it does mean recognizing our shared humanity. Everyone carries a shadow, and when you embrace your own, you no longer need to pretend you are above others. You meet them as equals. And in that meeting, true connection becomes possible. This is why wholeness is far more powerful than perfection. Perfection is brittle, fragile. It breaks the moment life shows its rough edges. Wholeness, on the other hand, is strong because it already includes the rough edges. When you embrace your shadow, you are no longer afraid of being exposed. You have nothing to hide, and so you live with more freedom, more authenticity. And from this authenticity, purpose shines naturally. You are not trying to be something. You are simply being yourself fully. And that is where meaning is found. Think of the artist who finally paints with all the colors, not just the safe ones. Their work gains depth. Think of the musician who allows sorrow as well as joy into their songs. The music becomes powerful. Think of the teacher who shares their own struggles as well as their wisdom. Their words carry weight. The same is true for you. When you embrace your shadow, your life gains depth. You are no longer flat, one-dimensional. You are real. And in being real, you discover what only you can bring to the world. But some will ask, isn't it dangerous to embrace the shadow? What if it leads me astray? The answer is this: ignoring it is far more dangerous. When you repress the shadow, it controls you unconsciously. That is when it causes real harm. But when you face it consciously, with awareness, it becomes energy you can use. It becomes part of your wholeness. To be whole is not to indulge every impulse, but to recognize them, to understand them, and to guide them wisely. The shadow, once integrated, becomes your ally. It gives you power without corruption. And here is where the deepest purpose begins to reveal itself. Your wounds are not mistakes. They are the raw material of your gift. The very thing you thought disqualified you may be the thing that qualifies you most. A person who has felt loneliness may be called to create community. A person who has known fear may be called to bring courage to others. A person who has faced failure may be called to teach resilience. The shadow holds not only your pain, but also the seed of your contribution. Your purpose is born from both, so do not be surprised if your path feels like a descent, before it feels like a rise. The hero must enter the cave before they find the treasure. You too must face the shadow before you discover your calling. And when you do, you realize that purpose was never about escaping the dark. It was about bringing the dark into the light. This is the dance of life. Night and day, joy and sorrow, light and shadow. To embrace both is to awaken. To awaken is to live with depth. And in depth, purpose arises naturally. Look at the areas where you feel the strongest emotion. Look at your anger, your envy, your shame. These are not random. They are signals. They are the places where your shadow is knocking, saying, pay attention. If you follow those signals, you will discover more about yourself than you ever could through polite self-improvement. For the shadow shows you where you are hiding. And where you are hiding is where your life's purpose is waiting. What you run from is often what you are here to give. And this is not only personal, it is collective. For when you face your shadow, you stop projecting it onto others. You stop adding your hidden fear to the world's chaos. Instead, you bring clarity. You bring compassion. Imagine a world where people no longer fought their shadows through each other, but faced them within themselves. Wars would lessen. Hatred would soften. Understanding would deepen. This is why facing your shadow is not selfish. It is service. The more whole you become, the more whole the world becomes. So do not think of this as self-improvement. Think of it as self-integration. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be whole. And wholeness requires every part of you, the light and the dark, the joy and the sorrow, the strengths and the flaws. When you allow it all, you discover a freedom unlike anything else. You no longer have to prove yourself, hide yourself, or run from yourself. You can simply live. And in that living, you naturally express your purpose. It flows out of you because it is you. The shadow, then, is not a burden. It is a gift. It is the part of you that demands honesty. And honesty is the root of authenticity. Authenticity is the root of purpose. Think of it this way. If you never faced your shadow, you would live someone else's life, chasing borrowed dreams, pleasing the crowd. But when you face it, you reclaim your true path. And that path, though it may not look grand in the world's eyes, is the only one that will ever satisfy you. Because it is yours, entirely yours. So I ask you, what are you running from? What do you criticize most in others? What do you bury in yourself? These are not signs of your failure. They are the doorway to your future. If you turn and walk through them, you will find energy you did not know you had. You will find gifts you had long forgotten. You will find the very purpose you thought you were missing. Life has hidden it in the place you least wanted to look. That is the divine joke. That is the paradox. And when you finally embrace your shadow, you will notice something extraordinary. You stop being divided. You feel a sense of peace you could never find by pretending. You feel a strength that comes from knowing, I am all of this, and I am enough.
You know, there comes a moment in many people's lives when everything suddenly feels utterly pointless. The job that once seemed important now feels like a meaningless charade. The relationships that once brought joy now feel like empty performances. The goals you were chasing now seem arbitrary and hollow. And you look at your life and think, what's the point of any of this? Why am I doing what I'm doing? What does any of it matter? This is not depression, necessarily, though it might look like it from the outside. This is something much more interesting. This is what happens when you wake up from the collective dream, when you start to see through the game that everyone is playing, when the meaning that you borrowed from society begins to dissolve, and you're left facing the raw question, what is the point? Now, most people respond to this feeling in one of two ways, and both are problematic. The first response is panic. They feel the pointlessness and immediately try to run from it, to distract themselves, to create new meanings, new goals, new purposes. They throw themselves into work, into relationships, into causes, into addictions, anything to avoid sitting with that uncomfortable feeling that nothing matters. The second response is resignation. They accept the pointlessness as a final truth and sink into a kind of nihilistic despair. If nothing matters, why do anything? Why get out of bed? Why engage with life at all? They become paralyzed by the very insight that could have freed them. But I want to suggest a third response, a response that's actually quite revolutionary. What if the feeling that everything is pointless is not a problem to be solved, but a doorway to be walked through? What if it's not the end of meaning, but the beginning of a much deeper kind of meaning? Let me explain what I mean. When you feel that everything is pointless, what you're really recognizing is that all the meanings you've been living by are invented. They're made up. They're stories that human beings have told themselves to make sense of existence. And there's nothing wrong with stories, but when you realize that they're just stories, that there's no cosmic necessity to any of them, something very important has happened. You've seen through the game. You've recognized that meaning is not found, it's created. And once you see this, you can never go back to the innocent belief that your job or your relationship or your cause has some inherent, absolute meaning. The spell is broken. And this feels pointless at first because you've lost the meanings you were borrowing from outside yourself. Society told you that success matters, that family matters, that progress matters, that leaving a legacy matters. And you believed it. You made these borrowed meanings your own and built your life around them. But now you've seen that these are just agreements, just collective stories that we've decided to take seriously. And once you see the arbitrary nature of these meanings, they lose their power over you. And yes, this creates a void, a sense of pointlessness. But this void is not the end, it's the beginning. You see, as long as you're living according to borrowed meanings, you're not really free. You're like an actor who's so identified with their role that they've forgotten their acting. You take the script seriously because you think it's real, because you think it matters in some absolute sense. But when you realize it's just a script, just a story, you're suddenly free to play the role differently, or to choose a different role entirely, or to write your own script. The feeling of pointlessness is the recognition of your freedom. It's the moment when you realize that you don't have to live according to anyone else's definitions of what matters. You're free to decide for yourself what's meaningful, what's worth doing, how you want to spend your brief time in this strange existence. But here's where most people make a mistake. They think that because nothing has inherent meaning, they now need to create meaning, to impose meaning on a meaningless universe. And so they go searching for their purpose, their passion, their mission. They think they need to figure out what their life is supposed to be about and then dedicate themselves to it. But this is just another trap. This is taking the feeling of pointlessness and trying to cover it up with a new story, a new meaning, a self-created purpose. And while this might work for a while, it's ultimately just another game, just another way of avoiding the deeper truth. The deeper truth is this: life doesn't need a point. Existence doesn't require justification. You don't need a reason to be here or a purpose to fulfill. The question, what's the point, is itself based on a misunderstanding, on the assumption that there should be a point, that meaning is something life owes you. But what if life is not a journey towards some goal, not a problem to be solved, not a story that needs a satisfying conclusion? What if life is more like music or dance? You don't listen to a symphony in order to reach the end. You don't dance in order to arrive somewhere. The point of music is the music itself. The point of dancing is the dancing itself. It's not going somewhere. It's already here, fully present in each moment. In the same way, the point of life is simply living, simply being, simply the experience of existence itself. Not for anything, not toward anything, but as an end in itself. This very moment, exactly as it is the point. This breath, this sensation, this thought, this feeling, this is it. There's nothing else you need to get to, nothing else you need to achieve, no higher meaning you need to discover. When you really understand this, when you truly see that life doesn't need justification, something remarkable happens. The feeling of pointlessness transforms into something else entirely. It becomes a kind of lightness, a freedom, a playfulness. If there's no ultimate point, if there's no cosmic significance to anything you do, then you're free to simply enjoy the process of living without the burden of having to make it mean something. You can work at your job without needing it to be your calling. You can love someone without needing them to complete you. You can pursue goals without needing to achieve them. You can create things without needing them to be important. You can play the game of life with full intensity while knowing it's just a game. This is what I mean when I say the feeling of pointlessness is a doorway. It's the doorway out of seriousness, out of the heavy burden of trying to make your life matter, out of the exhausting project of creating meaning. On the other side of that doorway is a kind of freedom that most people never experience. The freedom to live without needing life to be anything other than what it is. Now, this doesn't mean you become passive or apathetic. Quite the opposite. When you're no longer burdened by the need to make everything meaningful, you're actually more free to engage fully with life. You can throw yourself into activities with complete abandon, not because they matter in some ultimate sense, but simply because they're what's happening, because they're the form that life is taking in this moment. Think about a child playing. The child isn't worried about the meaning of the game. The child isn't asking, what's the point of playing? The child is simply absorbed in the playing itself, fully present, fully engaged. And then the game ends, and the child moves on to something else without any sense that the game needed to have a lasting purpose or significance. This is how you can live when you've walked through the doorway of pointlessness. You can engage with life fully and passionately, and then let it go and move on to the next moment, the next game, the next experience. Nothing needs to be permanent. Nothing needs to be ultimately meaningful. Everything can be enjoyed for what it is, in the moment that it's happening. But what about the big questions? What about death? What about suffering? What about the fact that everything you do will eventually be forgotten? That the universe will end? That nothing you create will last forever? Doesn't this make everything pointless? Only if you think the point of life is to leave a permanent mark, to create something that lasts, to be remembered. But why should that be the point? The sunset is beautiful, and then it's gone. The flower blooms, and then it wilts. The wave rises, and then it falls back into the ocean. Nothing about the temporary nature of these things makes them less valuable, less beautiful, less worth experiencing. In fact, it's precisely because things are temporary that they're precious. If the sunset lasted forever, would you still stop to watch it? If flowers never wilted, would you treasure them? The poignancy of life, its bittersweet beauty, comes from the fact that it's fleeting, that each moment happens only once, that everything is always already passing away, even as it's arriving. So when everything feels pointless, when you look at your life and can't find the meaning you once thought was there, this is not a crisis. This is an opportunity. It's the opportunity to stop living for some imaginary future point, some goal or achievement or legacy, and to start living for the sheer fact of being alive, for the immediate experience of existence. What do you do when everything feels pointless? You stop asking what the point is. You stop trying to justify your existence or prove your worth or make your life matter. You simply live. You breathe, you eat, you walk, you talk, you work, you play, you love, you create, not because any of it means something in the grand scheme of things, but because this is what life is. This is what's happening. This is the dance you're dancing. And in this surrender, in this letting go of the need for meaning, you might discover something surprising. You might discover that life becomes more vivid, more immediate, more alive when you stop trying to make it mean something. Colors are brighter when you're not worried about their significance. Food tastes better when you're not concerned with its purpose. Relationships are more intimate when you're not using them to fill some void. The pointlessness, when you really embrace it, becomes a kind of freedom. It's the freedom to be completely here, completely present, completely engaged with what is, without the overlay of meaning, without the weight of significance, without the burden of purpose. Let me tell you a Zen story that illustrates this. A student comes to the master and says, "Master, I've studied all the scriptures, I've practiced all the techniques, I've contemplated all the koans, but still, I don't understand. What is the meaning of life?" And the master says, "Have you eaten your breakfast?" The student says yes. The master says, then go wash your bowl. You see, the student is looking for some grand cosmic meaning, some ultimate purpose. But the master is pointing to the simple fact of living. Eat your breakfast, wash your bowl. This moment, this activity, this simple fact of existence, this is it. There's nothing else you need to find, nothing else you need to understand. When everything feels pointless, this is what you do. You eat your breakfast, you wash your bowl, you do what's in front of you to do, not because it has some grand meaning, but because this is the form that life is taking right now. You're here, you're alive, and this is what being alive looks like in this moment. And gradually, if you stay with this, if you don't run back to searching for meaning or sink into despair, you begin to notice something. You begin to notice that the question itself dissolves. What's the point? Stops being a relevant question. It's like asking what the point of a sunset is, or what the purpose of a mountain is, or what a river means. These questions don't make sense because these things don't exist for any reason beyond themselves. They're not means to an end. They're ends in themselves. And so are you. You're not here to accomplish something, or to fulfill some purpose, or to make your life mean something. You're here because you're here. You're alive because you're alive. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. So when everything feels pointless, celebrate. You've seen through the game. You've recognized that all the meanings you were chasing were just stories. And now you're free. Free to live without the burden of having to make it all matter. Free to enjoy the sunset without needing it to teach you a lesson. Free to love without needing it to complete you. Free to work without needing it to define you. Free to simply be alive for no reason at all. This is the great liberation that comes from walking through the doorway of pointlessness. On the other side, you discover that life was never about the point. You know, there's something rather amusing about this whole spiritual business. People come to me and they say, Alan, I've been meditating. I've been reading all the right books. I've had this extraordinary experience of oneness with everything. And then almost in the same breath, they add, but why am I so terribly alone? Why can't I find someone to love? And I look at them, and I want to laugh. Not because I'm mocking their pain, you understand, but because they don't see the cosmic joke they've walked into. They've awakened to the fact that they are the entire universe expressing itself, and now they're complaining that they can't find a date on Saturday night. It's like a wave suddenly realizing it's the ocean, and then worrying that it can't find another wave to go steady with. But let me tell you something. This loneliness, this sense of standing apart from the ordinary games of romance, it's not a bug in the system. It's a feature. And once you understand why, you'll see that what looks like a problem is actually the opening of a door to something far more interesting than anything you left behind. So let's talk about love. Real love. And why those who wake up find the old game utterly impossible to play. The first thing you must understand is that what most people call love is nothing of the sort. It's a transaction, a barter system. Two hungry ghosts making arrangements in the dark. You see, we've all been taught a very peculiar story about love. We're taught that somewhere out there is the other half of ourselves, that we are incomplete, broken, insufficient. And if we could just find that special someone, that missing piece, we would finally be whole. What a marvelous piece of fiction that is. And like all good fiction, millions believe it without question. So we go through life shopping for completion. We dress ourselves up, we learn the right words to say, we practice our smiles in the mirror. And all the while we're terrified, absolutely terrified, that no one will choose us, that we'll be left on the shelf like unwanted merchandise. So this is what passes for a romance in our world. Two people, each convinced of their own incompleteness, each desperately hoping the other will fill the void. And for a while, it works. The intoxication of it, the fever, the sleepless nights, the constant thinking about the other person. We call this falling in love. But notice the word, falling. As if love were a pit you stumble into, as if it was something that happens to you rather than something you do. And what fuels this falling? Not love, my friends. Not love at all. But need. Raw, desperate need. The need to escape from the horror of being alone with ourselves. The need to prove that we matter, that we exist, that someone finds us worthy of attention. It's all very romantic on the surface. The love letters, the declarations, the dramatic gestures. But underneath, it's just two people using each other as life preservers in what they imagine to be a drowning. Now here's where it gets interesting. When you awaken, even just a little bit, you begin to see through this game. You start to notice that what you called love was mostly fear wearing a prettier costume. You see how much of your passion was really just anxiety about being alone. How much of your devotion was really just bargaining. I'll be what you want if you'll be what I want. I'll soothe your terror if you'll soothe mine. And once you see this, once you really see it, you can't unsee it. It's like watching a magic trick after someone has explained how it's done. Oh, you can still appreciate the skill involved. You can admire the performance, but you're no longer fooled by it. The rabbit was in the hat all along. This is why the awakened find it so difficult to fall in love in the conventional way. Not because they've become cold or unfeeling, quite the opposite, but because they can no longer participate in the mutual hypnosis that passes for romance. They've seen the wires holding up the stage. They know the love songs are about neediness dressed up in moonlight. They recognize the whole drama for what it is, a beautiful, tragic game that two incomplete people play to avoid facing their own emptiness. But here's the thing. When you wake up, you discover something extraordinary. You're not empty at all. That void you were so afraid of, that terrible loneliness you were trying to escape, it was never real. It was a story you told yourself. A story so convincing that you organized your entire life around avoiding it. The truth is, you are not half a person waiting to be completed. You are not a fragment of something that broke apart at birth. You are the whole thing. You are the universe experiencing itself through this particular pattern called you. You are as complete right now as you will ever be. The idea that you need someone else to make you whole is like a wave, thinking it needs another wave to become water. It's already water. It was always water. And when you really understand this, when you feel it in your bones, something shifts. The desperate hunger that drove you toward others begins to quiet down. You stop scanning every room for potential saviors. You stop measuring every interaction by whether it might lead to the completion you seek. Because you're not seeking completion anymore, you're already complete. Now this sounds wonderful in theory, and in many ways it is. There's a tremendous freedom in not needing others to validate your existence. But there's also a price. And the price is this. You can no longer play the old game. You can no longer pretend that the theatrical performances of conventional romance are real. You can't fake being swept away when you see too clearly how the sweeping is done. This is where the loneliness comes in. Not the loneliness of being physically alone. That's easy. You can sit by yourself for hours and feel perfectly content. No, this is a different kind of loneliness. It's the loneliness of seeing through a game that everyone else still play. It's like being the only adult at a children's party. The children are having a wonderful time. They're completely absorbed in their games. But you can't join them. Not because you don't want to, but because you can't make yourself believe the games are real anymore. You meet someone. They're attractive. They're interesting. They seem to like you. And in the old days, this is where the story would begin. The story of pursuit and conquest, of longing and fulfillment, of two people finding each other in the vastness of the world. But now you see the story before it even starts. You see how it will unfold. The initial intoxication, the gradual revelation of flaws, the negotiation of needs, the slow recognition that neither of you can give the other what they're really looking for, because what they're looking for doesn't exist outside themselves. And so you hesitate, not out of fear, but out of clarity. You cannot walk into a trap when you see it so plainly. You cannot drink the poison when you know what's in the cup. And this hesitation, this inability to throw yourself into the old drama, it sets you apart. Others sense it. They feel that you're not playing by the usual rules, and it makes them uncomfortable, or it makes them curious, but either way, it creates distance. Here's what nobody tells you about awakening. It raises the standard. Before, you might have been content with someone who made you laugh, someone who found you attractive, someone who filled the evenings with conversation. But now, that's not enough. You're looking for something else, something that has no name in the usual vocabulary of romance. You're looking for someone who has also seen through the game, someone who knows they are already whole, someone who isn't trying to use you as a missing piece in their puzzle. Because only then can you meet each other as you actually are, not as fantasies or saviors or solutions to loneliness, but as two expressions of the same reality, two waves that have both realized their ocean. And here's the difficulty. Such people are rare, extraordinarily rare. Most people are still caught in the old story. They're still looking for their other half. They're still trying to build their identity through relationships. They're still playing the game with deadly seriousness. And you can't blame them for this. You played it too, until you didn't, until you saw through it. But the fact remains, the field has narrowed considerably. Where once there were many possibilities, now there are few. Where once you might have fallen in love with someone's smile, or their wit, or their way of moving through the world, now you need something more. You need them to be awake, or at least awakening. You need them to know what you know, to see what you see. And that severely limits the options. This is why so many spiritually awake people find themselves alone. Not because they can't love, but because they can't love in the old way anymore. They've outgrown it. Like a child who has learned to read and can no longer find satisfaction in picture books. The old stories don't work anymore. They need something more substantial, something real. And sometimes, often actually, that something real doesn't appear. Years go by, you meet people, you have conversations, you feel connections, but none of them go deep enough. None of them touch the place where you actually live. And so you remain alone, not in bitterness, not in despair, but in a kind of patient waiting. Waiting for someone who speaks your language, who breathes the same air, who has traveled to the same country you have and knows its geography. There's a certain dignity in this aloneness, a kind of integrity. You're not willing to settle for less than truth. You're not willing to go back to sleep just because sleeping is more comfortable. You'd rather stand in clarity, even if it means standing alone, than kneel in illusion with company. But let's be honest, it's not always easy. There are nights when the silence feels heavy, when you wonder if you've made a terrible mistake. When you look at people in their ordinary relationships, with all their ordinary dramas and compromises, and you think maybe that would be easier. Maybe you're asking too much. Maybe this clarity you've gained has cost you something precious. And you'd be right. It has cost you something. It's cost you the ability to be satisfied with illusion. It's cost you the option of using another person to avoid yourself. It's cost you the comfort of not knowing what you know. These are real costs. And sometimes they feel like too much to pay. But here's what you must understand. You can't go back, even if you wanted to. Even if you tried to play the old game, to pretend you don't see what you see. It wouldn't work. The awakening has happened. You've tasted something real. And once you've tasted the real thing, the counterfeit loses all its flavor. So what do? You wait. You live. You continue to grow and learn and experience the richness of existence. You don't close your heart. You don't become bitter or cynical. You simply recognize that love, real love, must come from a different place now. Not from need, but from fullness. Not from fear, but from freedom. Not from the desperate grasping of two incomplete people, but from the joyful meeting of two whole beings. And maybe it comes. Maybe one day you meet someone who has walked the same path, who carries the same quality of presence, who looks at you and sees not a solution to their loneliness, but a companion in the mystery. Someone who doesn't need you to complete them, because they're already complete. Someone who can love you not because they must, but because they choose to. Because the loving itself is the point, not what they get from it. When that happens, if it happens, it's nothing like the old falling in love. There's no fever, no obsession, no desperate clinging. Instead, there's a recognition, a meeting of equals. Two people who are already at peace with themselves, choosing to share that peace with each other. Not because they need to, but because they want to. Because it's delightful. Because it's an expression of the freedom they've each discovered within themselves. This kind of love doesn't bind, it doesn't possess, it doesn't make demands. It simply is. Like water flowing, like birds flying, like the sun shining. It's love without agenda, without negotiation, without the subtle bargaining that underlies so much of what passes for love in this world. But again, such love is rare, and there's no guarantee you'll find it. You might spend your whole life waiting. You might die having never met another awake being in the intimate way you long for. And you must make peace with that possibility. You must be willing to walk alone, if that's what clarity requires. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is to go back to sleep, to stuff yourself back into the old costume and play the old part, to use someone or let someone use you in the mutual pretense that this will solve the problem of existence. And you can't do that anymore. The costume doesn't fit. The role doesn't convince. You've seen behind the curtain, and there's no putting the veil back up. So you carry this strange gift, this burden of clarity. You're awake in a world that's mostly sleeping. You see through games that everyone else takes seriously. And yes, it's lonely sometimes. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, you wish it were easier to find someone who understands. But you wouldn't trade it, because you've tasted freedom. And freedom, real freedom, is worth any price. The spiritually awake can't find love, not because love has abandoned them, but because they refuse to call anything less than truth by that name. They've stopped confusing need with love, hunger with passion, attraction with devotion. They've stopped playing the game where two people use each other as escapes from themselves. And in stopping, they've opened themselves to something far more real. Something that may never come, or that may come tomorrow, or that may already be here, in forms they haven't learned to recognize yet. But whatever happens, they know this: they are already whole, already complete, already free. And that knowledge, that certainty, is more valuable than all the counterfeit romances in the world. They would rather be alone in truth than coupled in illusion. They would rather wait a lifetime for something real than settle for something that merely fills the time. This is the price of awakening, and it is also its gift. You lose the ability to lose yourself in others, but you gain the ability to find yourself in everything. You lose the comfort of mutual neediness, but you gain the freedom of not needing at all. You lose the old story of romance, but you open yourself to the possibility of something so much greater, Love without conditions, love without demands, love that asks nothing and gives everything. Love that is not a feeling or an emotion, but a way of being in the world. And if you never find another person to share that with, well, you still have the love itself. Because it was never in the other person anyway. It was always in you, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be lived. Not as a transaction between two people, but as the ground of your very being. As what you are, not what you do. As the ocean, not the wave. This is why the spiritually awake can't find love in the usual way, because they've already found it in the most important way. They've found it in themselves. And nothing, no person, no relationship, no romance, however sweet, can compare to that discovery. Everything else is just play. Delightful perhaps, beautiful sometimes, but play nonetheless. And you can enjoy the play without mistaking it for the real thing, without betting your piece on its outcome, without forgetting who you are beneath all the costumes and roles. So yes, you're alone sometimes. Yes, the crowd has thinned out. Yes, it's harder to find someone who speaks your language. But you're also free in a way you never were before. Free to love without needing. Free to connect without clinging. Free to be yourself without apology or pretense. And that freedom, that vast, spacious freedom, is what you've been looking for all along. Not in another person, but in yourself, where it always was, where it always will be. Yes, waiting for you to come home.
Most of us live as though time were a straight line, stretching from the distant past, through the fleeting present, into the unknown future. We are taught to imagine ourselves as travelers along this line, beginning with birth, moving through childhood, adulthood, and finally ending at death. And because we see it this way, we spend much of our lives trying to get somewhere else. We long to reach the next point on the line, the promotion, the relationship, the success, the retirement, as if the meaning of our existence always lies just ahead. But what if this picture is entirely wrong? What if time is not a line at all, but a trick of perception, a useful convention that we mistake for reality? What if the past and the future are not places we can ever truly visit, but rather ideas, shadows, abstractions that exist only in thought? Consider the past. You may remember it vividly. The warmth of your childhood home, the smell of your grandmother's cooking, the sound of laughter echoing in a familiar room. But where is that now? You cannot hold it, you cannot touch it. It exists only as a memory, a trace in the present mind. And the future, the great destination we are all hurrying toward, is even more elusive. It has never arrived. And when it does, it is no longer the future. It is simply another present moment, just as ordinary, just as immediate as this one. So the only reality you ever truly know is the present. And yet, how rarely do we inhabit it? Instead, we live in stories about the past and fantasies about the future, carrying regrets and anxieties like heavy luggage on a journey that never leaves the station. Time, then, is not so much a thing, but a way of thinking. It is a lens through which we view change, a measurement we impose on the flow of experience. The clock ticks, the calendar flips, and we believe we are moving forward, step by step. But in truth, the movement is not in time. The movement is in ourselves. The present moment is eternal. It never began, and it will never end. What changes is our attention, our awareness, shifting like the beam of a flashlight over the vast field of now. If you look carefully, you will notice that you never experience time itself. You experience only sensations, thoughts, emotions, each one arising and fading within this moment. You do not live in yesterday or tomorrow. You live only here. Yesterday is a thought now. Tomorrow is a thought now. Even the idea of now is a thought happening now. To say time is an illusion is not to say that clocks are useless or that schedules do not function. It is to say that the reality we imagine time to be a great river carrying us along is not what we actually experience. What we experience is more like music. A melody does not exist all at once, as notes on a page. It exists in the playing, in the sounding of one note after another. And yet, the meaning of the melody is never in one note alone, but in the relationship between them. Likewise, life is not a series of isolated moments, but a flowing rhythm. And in that rhythm, the only place you ever stand is the present. But we resist this truth because we are addicted to becoming. We want to be something more than what we are now. We say, one day I'll be happy, one day I'll arrive. And in chasing that arrival, we miss the only arrival there has ever been. For when you look closely, you see that there is no traveler and no line of time. There is only the eternal unfolding of this very moment. Think of it like a wave in the ocean. You might say the wave begins here and ends there. But in reality, the wave is not a thing separate from the ocean, it is the ocean waving. In the same way, what you call your life in time is simply the universe presenting itself. There is no separate you moving through time. There is only the eternal dance of being, taking this shape and then that, rising and falling, just as waves rise and fall in the sea. And if this is so, then death itself is not the end of time, because there was never a personal timeline to begin with. Death is simply another change of form within the eternal now. What you are, in truth, is not bound by the calendar or the clock. You are the present awareness in which all of these things appear. When you see this clearly, an extraordinary freedom opens. For if there is no past holding you and no future binding you, then what is there to fear? What is there to regret? Every burden you carry is only a thought, a story, a memory. And every hope you chase is only a dream, a fantasy, an expectation. None of it has ever been realer than the sensations in your body, the sound of my voice, the beating of your heart right now. And so the invitation is simple. Awaken to this present, not as a stepping stone to somewhere else, but as the very essence of life. For the illusion of time is that it tempts us to live everywhere but here. And the truth of life is that here is all there has ever been. We live in a culture that worships the clock. Our days are chopped into hours, our hours into minutes, our minutes into seconds. We rise when the alarm rings, we eat by the schedule, we work by the calendar, and when the evening comes, we collapse into bed to prepare for another cycle. Life becomes a timetable, a program to be run. And so we mistake the measure for the thing measured. We believe that time is real because we have become servants of the instruments designed to track it. But tell me, have you ever touched a minute? Have you ever seen an hour lying on the street? These are not realities. They are symbols, abstractions, agreements we made with one another to coordinate our lives, and yet we live as though they were masters, as though they held power over our very being. This creates a peculiar anxiety, because if time is real, then it is always running out. Each tick of the clock becomes a step toward loss of youth, loss of opportunity, loss of life itself. We chase after time the way a dog chases its tail, never catching it, never resting. And so we speak of killing time, of wasting time, of saving time, as though time was some great treasure stored in a vault. But time cannot be saved, nor wasted, nor killed. It can only be imagined. You see, the future you are hurrying toward will never come. When it does, it will not be the future, it will be now. And the past you cling to has already dissolved, except as a thought arising here. This present moment is not something moving along a line, like a bead sliding on a string. It is the whole string itself, appearing as a bead for a moment, then another, and another, yet never leaving the fullness of being. The more you chase after what is not here, the more you miss the wonder that island. It is like standing in the middle of a garden, surrounded by flowers in bloom, and yet staring at your watch, waiting for the right moment to look up. The flowers do not wait, they open now. But perhaps the greatest trick of time is the way it builds the illusion of a separate self. For we imagine ourselves as entities with a beginning in the past and an ending in the future, stretched like a thread across the loom of time. We say, I was born then, and I will die then. But look closely. You never experienced your birth. You will never experience your death. You know only this moment, and in this moment, you are not a fixed identity. You are an ever-changing pattern of sensations, thoughts, and perceptions, none of which remain for more than a fleeting instant. So, who, then, are you? You are not the child you once were, for that child exists only in memory. You are not the elder you imagine becoming, for that image exists only in fantasy. You are not even the you of a moment ago, for that thought has already vanished. You are, in truth, the awareness in which all of these forms appear and disappear. You are the timeless witness of time's illusion. When this realization dawns, a curious thing happens. Life ceases to feel like a journey with a destination and begins to feel like music being played. You no longer listen to the symphony in order to reach the final note, for the value is in the unfolding of the melody. You no longer dance to arrive at some final step, for the joy is in the movement itself. And so you see that existence is not a race to be won, but a song to be sung, a dance to be danced, endlessly, without purpose other than itself. To live without being bound by time is not to abandon all plans or calendars. It is simply to remember that these are conveniences, not truths. You may still make an appointment, but you no longer mistake the appointment for life itself. You may still mark a birthday, but you no longer believe you are merely the number of years measured. For you know that what you truly are is beyond all measurement, beyond all counting. You are the timeless presence in which time appears. And when you live from this recognition, something profound shifts. The anxiety of running out, the fear of missing out, the constant hunger for the next moment, all of this softens. You begin to see that you have never left this moment, and you never will. Eternity is not a long stretch of endless time. Eternity is the absence of time. Eternity is now. So do not wait for the future to give you what you already possess. Do not cling to the past as though it could return. Look instead at what is here. Feel the breath as it enters and leaves. Hear the sounds as they arise and fall. Notice the thoughts as they flicker and vanish. All of it is happening in the only place it could, this eternal present. And once you see this, time becomes play. You can wear a watch, you can follow a schedule, you can meet a deadline, but you do it lightly, knowing it is all part of the dance. For beneath it all, the truth is unchanged. There is no past, there is no future, there is only the miracle of now. And in that miracle, you are free.
Isn't it curious? The more you give yourself away, the less you are truly seen. If the sun never set, we would cease to notice its light. If a bird sang without pause, its song would dissolve into noise. But the moment you step back, the moment you withdraw into silence, suddenly your presence takes on weight. People feel the shape of your absence, and in that very emptiness, you are valued again. This is one of life's delicious paradoxes. What is constant becomes invisible, what is scarce becomes precious. I don't mean trickery, nor the silly business of playing hard to get. That is just another mask. What I mean is the art of honoring your own presence, of moving with the same rhythm you find in the tides, in the waxing and waning of the moon. For even nature does not give itself all at once. nor all the time. Whatever is constant and without limit soon feels ordinary. Its gift lies not in burning without end, but in the rhythm of rising and falling, appearing and disappearing. If the sun never set, we would soon grow weary of its light and long for shadow. So it is with you. Your presence has power because it comes and goes like the tides that advance and recede, like love that breathes in closeness and in distance. Respect is born not from endless exposure, but from the spaces in between. Have you noticed how quickly generosity turns into expectation? The one who always says yes is soon taken for granted, while the one who withholds at times is cherished when they appear. It is not about virtue, but about balance. To step back is to remember your humanity. You are not a machine, but a rhythm, like the sea that ebbs and flows, like the moon that waxes and wanes. For life itself is not a straight line, but a dance of presence and absence. Isn't it strange? The moment you cease to be forever at hand, the relationship takes on new life. For when you are not always there, people no longer treat you as furniture in the room, but as a presence to be encountered. They lean closer. They listen. They treasure the passing moment. Even your silence, even your absence begins to speak. We only notice the sweetness of water when it grows scarce. When it gushes everywhere, it is wasted and ignored. But when it is drawn from a deep well, each sip is savored. So it is with your presence. If you flood the world with yourself, you wash away your value. But when you come and go like the tide, your presence refreshes like cool water in the desert. From childhood, we are taught to smile, to nod, to say yes, mistaking obedience for affection and availability for love. Yet love, like a garden, needs space to breathe. Too much rain drowns it, too much sun withers it. It flourishes in rhythm, not excess. Absence is not emptiness, but the interval that gives shape. Just as music is made not only of notes, but of the silence between them, so too love ripens in the dance of nearness and distance. Without the pauses, all dissolves into noise. Life is like a melody. And so if you never step back, never say no, you too become noise. Seen but not noticed, heard but not listened to. Value lies in the interval, the well-placed absence. This is not neglect, but rhythm. The tree does not bear fruit in every season. Fire does not burn forever. It must die down so it can be kindled again. Even breath itself depends on exhaling as well as inhaling. Why imagine you must give without rest? When you withdraw and return, your presence gathers weight, like the hush that makes the bells strike resound. And here is the paradox. By making yourself less available, you become more real. People meet your wholeness, not the fragments you scatter. Like the man who speaks rarely, it is not his words that are louder, but his silence that makes them precious. So it is with your presence. Given without pause, it is diluted. Held with rhythm, it gathers intensity. This is why stepping back is sometimes the most loving act of all. Look at love itself. Lovers who clutch too tightly smother the flame, while those who vanish altogether let the fire die. The art lies in rhythm, closeness and distance, voice and silence, embrace and release. Notice how the man who is seldom available is the one most carefully attended, not because his busyness is a virtue, but because his time carries weight. If he gives you a moment, it feels like a gift, for it has not been scattered like seed on barren ground. Contrast this with the one who is forever waiting, forever bending, whose presence is taken for granted precisely because it is always at hand. This is not a question of superiority, but of recognition. When you honor the worth of your own hours, others are compelled to honor them too. But if you spend them carelessly, the world will treat them as trifles. And so, to stop being always available is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the quiet refusal to leap at every summons, to patch every quarrel that is not yours, to serve as the eternal remedy for other people's restlessness. It is to stand rooted in yourself, and from that stillness to act when the moment is right. For your life is not meant to be endlessly consumed, but to be lived, richly, deeply, sincerely. And only from such fullness can you give in a way that nourishes, rather than exhausts. Now here is something quite remarkable. When you cease to be endlessly available, you begin to hear your own life again. For in forever tending to others, you drown the small secret music within. Your days are filled with clamor, but your soul remains unheard. Step back and suddenly you catch the whispers, the quiet callings, the subtle joys, the long-buried desires that rise like forgotten seeds breaking through the soil. To be available to yourself is the beginning of authenticity, and without authenticity, love itself becomes counterfeit. Every yes that betrays your own being is in truth a silent no, and from such denials only resentment can grow. There was a man who spent himself in the service of others, giving until he was emptied. Yet for all his sacrifice, he remained unseen. At last, exhausted, he stepped back. And only then did the world protest. They called him selfish, cold, neglectful. But slowly, something curious began to happen. In his absence, they began to feel the weight he had long carried. For the first time, his presence was no longer taken for granted, but respected. In stepping back, he had not lost love at all. He had opened the door for love to appear, where once there had only been convenience. So you see, to become less available is not an act of rejection, but of invitation. It is the invitation for others to wake up to your presence, and for you to wake up to yourself. For only in the open space between two beings can respect take root and love draw breath. When you are forever at hand, no one stops to wonder who you are or what you truly give. But when you withdraw, when you refuse to play the endless part, suddenly they must pause. They must look. And in that moment of seeing, the whole pattern begins to shift. Why, then, is this so hard? Because we are frightened. We imagine that a single no will banish love. We fear that if we step aside, we shall be forgotten. We tremble that if we honor our own worth, others will not. But ask yourself, if someone values you only so long as you are endlessly at their disposal, is that love, or is it merely convenience? Much of our suffering, you see, is not caused by what others do to us, but by what we permit. Out of fear of displeasing, we stretch ourselves thin, we give beyond our means, we say yes when the heart cries no, and then we cloak this self-betrayal under the name of kindness. But it is no kindness to betray yourself. To give what you do not have is like offering an empty bowl. True kindness flows only from fullness, and fullness requires form. To cease being endlessly available is to honor that form. To say, I am human, I have rhythm, I have worth. And yes, some may drift away when you step back, but then you discover a deeper truth. They were not with you at all, but with the endless fountain they mistook you for. Better to be cherished for your reality than tolerated for your exhaustion. Better to lose those who drained you than to lose yourself altogether. And here again the paradox shows its face. Those who truly matter, those who truly love, will not vanish when you step back. They will bend with you, as trees bend with the wind. They will grow into the space you create, and in that very movement, the bond deepens. So when you cease to be forever at hand, you do not become less, you become more visible, more authentic, more real. You gather together the scattered fragments of yourself and return as a whole being, and life always bows to wholeness. For wholeness has its own gravity. It draws, it attracts, it commands respect without demanding it. The broken self clamors to be noticed, while the whole self is noticed without effort. You cease to be background noise and become the very music to which others listen. Picture yourself as a well. If all may draw without end, the waters will one day vanish, and both you and they will be left thirsty. But when the well is guarded, when it is given time to fill again from its hidden springs, then those who come to drink find refreshment. To withdraw at times, to cease being endlessly available, is simply to keep the waters of your life pure and flowing. This is not selfishness, but the very condition that makes giving possible. From a full well, the water is sweet. From a dry one, nothing can be drawn. Yet the world will not at first thank you for this. Those who were accustomed to your endless flow will call you selfish, accuse you of change, and indeed you have changed. You are no longer a tool to be used, but a being who gives from freedom. This unsettles those who lived upon your weakness, but it strengthens those who honor your strength. In time the numbers may grow fewer, but the bonds grow deeper. For love that is real does not fear your boundary. It bows to it. So then we come to this curious question. Who are you when you're not forever on call, forever answering the ring of the world? Who are you when you sit still, when you stop chasing, when you listen to the hum inside your own skull? Most of us forget, you see, because we're so busy being useful to others that we've misplaced ourselves. But in the silence, in that delicious nothing, you suddenly stumble upon yourself again. And far from being empty, it's wonderfully full. To withdraw is not to desert life, but to return to it. For in stepping back, you discover that life is like breathing in and out. If you only breathe out, you collapse. If you only give, you dry up. The rhythm of the tide is the rhythm of being. You see? It's the old paradox. In not seeking, things come to you. In not clutching, they remain. And so, curiously, when you stop demanding respect, people respect you. When you cease to be always available, you become truly present. You don't have to insist on your worth, you are it. So, the game is not about being endlessly busy, endlessly agreeable. It's about rhythm, sincerity, wholeness. Say yes when it's a real yes. Say no when it's a real no. Step forward when you're full. Step back when it's time to fill. That isn't selfishness. That's simply the wisdom of the dance. And then, as if by magic, life begins to keep the beat with you. You know, one of the most peculiar and yet most inevitable experiences on the path of awakening is the discovery that you are changing in ways that others around you are not. And this creates a very strange predicament. It's rather like what happens when a caterpillar begins to transform into a butterfly while still surrounded by caterpillars who are quite content to remain caterpillars. Now, I want to talk about this because it's something that almost everyone who begins to wake up will encounter. And it can be one of the most isolating, confusing, and yes, dangerous experiences you'll face. Not dangerous in the sense that you'll come to physical harm necessarily, though that has happened throughout history. But dangerous in the sense that you may lose everything that once gave you a sense of belonging, identity, and security. Let me begin by saying that growth is not comfortable. It never has been, and it never will be. When a lobster outgrows its shell, it must shed that shell and expose itself, soft and vulnerable, until a new shell forms. During that time, it is in grave danger. Every predator in the ocean would love to make a meal of a soft-shelled lobster. But if the lobster refuses to shed its shell, if it clings to the safety of what it knows, it cannot grow. It will remain stunted, confined, unable to realize its full potential. Human beings are much the same way. We outgrow our shells, our beliefs, our relationships, our ways of understanding the world. And when we do, we become vulnerable. we lose the protection of the crowd, the comfort of conformity, the security of being like everyone else. And this vulnerability, this exposure, is what I mean by danger. Now, what does it mean to outgrow those around you? It doesn't mean that you've become superior or that you're better than they are. This is a trap that many people fall into. And it's a sign that they haven't really grown at all. They've simply traded one form of ego inflation for another. No, outgrowing others means that you've begun to see things that they don't see yet, that you've asked questions they haven't asked, that you've stepped out of the agreed-upon framework of reality while they remain comfortably within it. Perhaps you've begun to question the values that everyone takes for granted. The pursuit of wealth, status, security, the accumulation of possessions, the endless distractions and entertainments that fill up our lives. Perhaps you've begun to see that these things don't lead to happiness, that they're empty promises, that they're symptoms of a deeper malaise, a fundamental misunderstanding about what life is and what we are. Or perhaps you've had experiences through meditation, through contemplation, through crisis, through psychedelics, through some spontaneous opening that have shown you that reality is far more mysterious, far more fluid, far more consciousness dependent than the solid, objective, external world that everyone believes in. You've seen through the illusion of the separate self, or at least caught a glimpse behind the curtain, and now you can't unsee it. When this happens, you find yourself in a very odd position. You're living in two worlds simultaneously. There's the conventional world, the world of commerce and politics and daily routine, the world where everyone is playing their roles and taking it all very seriously. And then there's this other dimension, this deeper reality, that's always present but that most people are completely oblivious to. And you must learn to navigate both worlds. You must learn to speak two languages, the language of the marketplace and the language of the mystic. You must learn to be in the world but not of it, as the old saying goes. And this is extraordinarily difficult because the two worlds have different rules, different values, different ways of making sense of experience. The people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, they're still operating entirely within the conventional framework. They're concerned with their careers, their mortgages, their social standing, their plans for the future. And these concerns, which once seemed so important to you, now seem rather trivial, rather beside the point. Not because you've become callous or indifferent, but because you've seen that there are deeper questions, more fundamental issues at stake. But you can't simply tell them this. You can't sit down with your family at dinner and say, I've realized that the self is an illusion and that we're all manifestations of one universal consciousness. They'll look at you as if you've lost your mind. And in a sense, you've lost the conventional mind, the socially conditioned mind, and you haven't yet fully articulated what you found in its place. So you remain silent, or you speak in hints and suggestions, or you try to find people who understand what you're going through. And this is where the isolation begins. Because the people you've known all your life, the people you love and care about, increasingly seem to be living in a different reality than you are. You're speaking different languages, pursuing different goals, seeing the world through entirely different lenses. And they sense this, even if they can't articulate it. They sense that you're no longer quite one of them, that you've changed in some fundamental way, that you're not playing the game with the same enthusiasm you once had. And this makes them uncomfortable. It threatens them. Because if you can step outside the agreed-upon framework, then maybe the framework isn't as solid as they thought. Maybe their own lives are built on sand. They may respond in various ways. Some will try to pull you back, to normalize you, to get you to be the way you used to be. You've changed, they'll say, and it won't be a compliment. They'll accuse you of becoming strange, impractical, irresponsible, self-absorbed. They'll remind you of your duties, your obligations, your place in the social order. They'll do everything they can to squeeze you back into the box you've outgrown. Others will simply distance themselves from you. They'll find you boring or preachy or incomprehensible. The conversations that once flowed easily now feel forced and superficial. You have less and less in common. The friendship or relationship gradually withers, not through any dramatic break, but through a slow, sad drifting apart. Still others may become hostile. This is particularly true if you've outgrown a religious or ideological framework that they're still invested in. If you were raised in a particular faith and you've moved beyond it, if you've questioned the dogmas and found them wanting, your very existence becomes a threat to those who still believe. You're a heretic, an apostate, a lost soul who must be saved or shunned. This is the danger I'm speaking of. Not that you'll be physically harmed necessarily, though that can happen, but that you'll lose your community, your tribe, your sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. Human beings are social creatures. We need connection. We need to feel that we're part of a group, that we're understood and accepted. And when you outgrow those around you, you risk losing all of that. Now, you might say, well, why not just keep quiet about it? Why not simply maintain the facade, play along, keep your insights to yourself? And many people do exactly this. They live double lives. They maintain the conventional appearance while privately knowing that it's all a game, all a performance. And there's a certain wisdom in this approach. As I said earlier, you don't shake someone awake from a pleasant dream unless the house is on fire. But there are problems with this strategy as well. First, it's exhausting. Living a double life, constantly monitoring what you say, editing your thoughts, pretending to care about things that no longer matter to you, this takes a tremendous toll. You become alienated from yourself, split, fragmented. The very integration and wholeness you've been seeking through your spiritual growth becomes impossible because you're constantly betraying your own truth. Second, it's inauthentic. And authenticity, being true to what you've discovered, is essential to the spiritual path. If you've seen something true, something real, and you hide it, deny it, refuse to live by it, then what was the point of seeing it in the first place? You become like someone who's discovered a treasure but is too afraid to spend it, so they bury it in the ground and continue to live in poverty. Third, and perhaps most importantly, your very presence, even if you say nothing, communicates something. People pick up on energy, on vibration, on the unspoken. If you've genuinely transformed, if you've genuinely outgrown the conventional framework, it will show in 1,000 subtle ways in the quality of your attention, in your responses to crisis and difficulty, in what you laugh at, in what you take seriously, in the way you move through the world. So you're faced with a dilemma. You can't go back, you can't unsee what you've seen, unknow what you've known. But you can't fully go forward either. At least not without consequences, without losses, without a period of profound loneliness and disorientation. This is what the mystics have always called the dark night of the soul. It's the passage between the old life and the new, the death of the caterpillar before the emergence of the butterfly. And it's dark precisely because you've left behind the familiar landmarks, the comfortable certainties, but you haven't yet arrived at the new dispensation. You're in between, in limbo, in the wilderness. During this time, you may feel utterly alone. You may wonder if you've made a terrible mistake, if you've thrown away everything valuable for some nebulous spiritual fantasy. You may long for the days when life was simpler, when you fit in, when you didn't question everything, when you could just go along with the program like everyone else. But here's what you must understand. This loneliness, this sense of isolation, is not a sign that you've gone wrong. It's a sign that you're going right. It's an inevitable stage in the process of transformation. Every hero in every myth must leave the village, must venture into the unknown, must face dragons and demons alone before they can return with the treasure. The treasure, in this case, is your authentic self, your true nature, freed from the conditioning and programming of society. But you cannot claim this treasure while still clinging to the approval and acceptance of those who represent that very conditioning. You must be willing to stand alone, to be misunderstood, to be criticized, to be rejected. Now, I want to be very clear about something. This doesn't mean you should go out of your way to alienate people, or that you should be arrogant or superior, or that you should reject everyone who doesn't share your level of understanding. That would be spiritual egoism, and it's just another trap, another form of separation. What it means is that you accept the consequences of your growth with grace and compassion. You understand that people are where they are, and they're doing the best they can with the level of consciousness they have. You don't judge them or look down on them. You simply recognize that you're on different paths, at least for now. And you trust that if you're meant to have community, if you're meant to have companions on the journey, they will appear. Because here's the wonderful thing. When you outgrow one level, when you shed one shell, you don't remain alone forever. You find others who have also outgrown that level. You discover a new community, a new tribe, a new set of companions who speak your language, who understand your experience, who are wrestling with the same questions you are. This is why spiritual seekers throughout history have formed communities, monasteries, ashrams, mystery schools, philosophical circles. Not because they're elitist or exclusive, but because they needed to be with others who understood what they were experiencing, who could support them through the difficult transitions, who could remind them that they weren't crazy, that the path was real, that the struggle was worthwhile. But these communities are often hidden, or at least not obvious. They don't advertise, they don't proselytize. You find them when you're ready, when your seeking becomes sincere enough, when your loneliness becomes acute enough, and often you find them in unexpected places, a chance conversation with a stranger, a book that falls into your hands at exactly the right moment, a teacher who appears just when you need them. The key is not to cling desperately to the old relationships out of fear of being alone, but also not to cut ties prematurely out of spiritual pride. There's a middle way, as there always is. You maintain what connections you can maintain authentically. You honor your history, your roots, the people who loved you before you changed. But you don't betray yourself to preserve those connections. You don't make yourself small to make others comfortable. And sometimes, miraculously, the people around you grow too. Sometimes your own transformation becomes a catalyst for their awakening. They see something in you, a peace, a clarity, a freedom, and they want it for themselves. They start asking questions. They start opening up. And then the relationship transforms along with you, deepens, becomes more real, more honest, more alive. But you can't force this. You can't make people grow. All you can do is be yourself, be authentic, be the embodiment of what you've discovered, and trust that those who are ready will recognize it. The rest will fall away, and you must let them go with love and gratitude for what they've given you, for the role they played in your journey, even if that role has now ended. The danger of outgrowing everyone around you is real. You may lose friends, family members, communities that once defined you. You may go through periods of profound loneliness. You may question whether it was worth it. But I can tell you, from my own experience and from observing countless others on this path, that on the other side of this danger is a freedom, an authenticity, a depth of being that makes all the losses worthwhile. Because what you gain is yourself, your true self. Not the self that was constructed to fit in, to please others, to meet expectations. And once you've found that, once you've tasted that freedom, you realize that you were never really losing anything real. You were only losing illusions, masks, false identities. The real connections, the real love, the real community, these remain, or they appear anew, deeper and truer than before. So if you find yourself outgrowing those around you, know that you're not alone, even in your aloneness. Know that this is part of the process, part of the path. Know that it's temporary, this loneliness, this sense of being between worlds. And know that the courage it takes to keep growing, to keep being true to what you've seen, even when it costs you everything familiar, this courage is the mark of a genuine spiritual warrior, a true seeker of truth. The caterpillar must die for the butterfly to be born. There's no way around it. But what emerges is so much more beautiful, so much more free, so much more alive than what was lost. Trust the process. Trust your growth, and trust that life, in its infinite intelligence, is guiding you exactly where you need to go, even when the path leads through darkness and uncertainty.